Well, everybody, welcome to the first ever episode of Movie Night with Mr. Entertainment. That's Mr. Entertainment to you. Here we are, the dead of night, to actually re-record this. Now, I may have done a previous recording of this that I wasn't happy with because I didn't have notes for it. Anyway, this is going to be a new movie review show coming out once a week, hopefully. Let's see if I can keep this shit up. One movie a week seems manageable. One recording session a week seems manageable. Obviously, episode 1 here is going to be about the 2022 movie Blonde. I was going to say the director, but I forget his name. Andrew something. Andrew Dominic. Pretty easy to remember now. I wonder if I'll put the year of the movie in the title and it'll look all cool. Perhaps. I did record this like a week ago. Maybe not that long, but I recorded it the same day I watched it. I sort of walked out of it like 20 minutes later after seeing the movie and thought it might be interesting to capture sort of the initial haze of having seen a movie, and then come in and talk about it. I like that. The initial haze after you've seen a movie is really cool, especially when you see it in like a theater or something and like the walk out and you're readjusting to light and you're being like, oh, back in the real world, what the fuck's this all about? And you're thinking about things. That's always fun. So I thought recapturing that might be cool. Turns out it was a bit rambly. A lot of the time I was forgetting things or whatever. I usually do that anyway, and I'll probably do that in this video anyway. So instead it's been a week. I've thought about it for about a week. I didn't think it's been a week, but about a week. We're going to go with a week. I've made some notes here too. So hopefully this one will be more structured, I guess, more thoughtful. Obviously, this is going to be a controversial one as well, so I want to be clear with my messaging. First, I want to make sure I've gone over all my housekeeping things. Brand new exciting show, once a week. The first 3 I will do solo, then we'll start bringing in losers on whenever they want. Plus, this will all make me watch a movie a week, Pog, which is a big effort. I need to consume more things. And this will be a useful tool in doing that. Make content out of it. Movie review show. I think I'm even going to number each episode too. Genius. Elite RE is still sick on and off again. So maybe initially I would have tried to make it... Because initially when I pitched this to all our collaborative friends, Mr. R, Bacon, even maybe Minty now, and Elite RE, of course, who's around the most... At this point, it used to be Bacon, but now it's Elite RE. But yeah, so initially I was like, oh, maybe I'll cycle through them like once every month. Like they'll do one week and then we'll continue on. Right now, what we're going to do is I'm going to do the first 3 solo just to show everybody what it is. And then later, if they want to pop on for certain movies. I also was toying with whether or not to make the movie we're going to cover a secret until the video comes out or to announce at the end of the one before. I think I'm going to announce it at the end of the one before, probably at the beginning or some shit, whenever I feel like it. So then if people in the audience want to follow along, they can watch the movie too and be interested, and stuff like that. And it'll build anticipation. We'll all be hanging from the rafters. But just to break that convention, the next 2 I think, and now these will always be subject to change on a whim, because you know me, but I think, because I want to make sure it's eclectic, I don't want people to think that we're just doing like movies as they come out, just because Blonde did come out pretty recently, within the last month or something, and it's a 2022 movie, of course, so to vary this up a bit, I think the next 2 movies we'll do is Casablanca and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, what a wacky collection of movies these 3 are. Casablanca is like a 30s or a 40s movie? No, I think it's a 40s movie because it's about World War II. I know what I know about Casablanca kind of in the way I know what I know about Marilyn Monroe, which is through like Mad Men context clues and Roger like mentioning them offhand every once in a while. But I'm interested, and I think that will be, well, I guess I watched The Wizard of Oz when I was younger, so it's not going to be the oldest movie I've ever seen, but it might be the second oldest one, because the second oldest one right now is 12 Angry Men, I think, but we watched that in school, so not to imply that I don't like it. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I was like, alright, then I'll do like an anime movie too, because my lingering weeb audience, but then I'm like, fuck this weeb shit, we got cartoons, and also I was watching the Red Letter Media review of it, and I was like, man, I should probably watch this movie. So I think those will be the next two. So we got a 2022, then like a 40s movie, then an 80s movie. I'm pretty sure Roger Rabbit is. So we'll have an eclectic bunch just to set the tone and say that we can do whatever the fuck we want on this movie review. Fucking shit. Me and Ari have been talking about wanting to go through Shakespeare stuff a lot. And we both came to the conclusion that we'd probably rather prefer to do it through movies, like probably more honest movie adaptations than like the wacky ones that are out there, the classical ones that were made in like the 70s and the 60s or even earlier or whatever. So we kind of want to do that. I want to get caught up on the Ghibli watch through I started like 5 years ago when I only watched Castle in the Sky and Grave of the Fireflies. We should get caught up on that. There's a million things we could go through. We can go through series. Ariz wanted me to watch what are the Harry Potter spin-offs called? So maybe we'll do that with him. I'm sure we'll get around to other weeaboo nonsense and the such. Maybe I'll watch these new DBZ movies. We'll have to see. But this is our rambling introduction, I think. I don't think there's any more housekeeping to go over as I eye my notes here. So that means we got to get into Blonde 2022, Andrew Dominic. What a controversial... No, there's a specific word I'm looking for here. What a clusterfuck the discourse surrounding this movie is, huh? Now, what would your old man over here think? Now, that's what everybody's waiting to hear. I wonder how much of my audience will at all give a fuck about this movie. Let me explain why I chose this movie initially, or why I was motivated to watch this movie. When I don't think, and I was actually brainstorming, I literally don't think I've watched a movie all year, which seems insane, but I can't think of one I watched since Spider-Man, and I'm pretty sure Spider-Man came out in December of last year. I certainly haven't been to the theater this year. Going to the theater's fun, though. Blonde was not a theater movie, however. It was a Netflix movie, streaming service movie. Now, why I saw Blonde is because I saw some people tweeting about it. Notably, Jay from Red Letter Media said it was like the greatest and worst movie he'd ever seen or something, like it was so well made, but I think he uses the word hateful, which I want to talk about later. Maybe I should find the tweet. I probably can't. But yeah, so I saw that and I was like, that's wacky. And I think I had vaguely heard things about the movie, maybe. Why, when you put in Jay from Red Letter Media, the first thing that came up was wife. But anyway, we're clicking on the Reddit. Jay's take on Blonde. Let's get this up real quick. Blonde is one of the most hateful biopics I've ever seen, but it's so well made, well acted, and totally unhinged that it's kind of admirable, almost, ? It's also an insane movie that goes big, but also somehow one note and awful. What a weird-ass movie. The top comment, the general consensus of this movie is so wild and all over the place when I went from kind of wanting to see it to definitely not, and not wanting to see it again. Well, that's wacky. Anyway, I don't want to read these reviews. In my last recording, I devolved into reading letterbox reviews, one-star letterbox reviews. I'm stealing everything from Red Letter Media now. My letterbox, by the way, in the description beneath. And you could spoil yourself on what I rated the movie. I guess I'll just say it now. But this fucking movie, I'll tell you what, got the big 5-star from me. I thought it was great. I thought it was legitimately, unbelievably great. Maybe a top 5 movie all time. And I've only hardened on this position. I have not softened on it in the week since. I think I really hardened on it through the talk of the Lost Recording session. But yes, and we're going to get into the manyest reasons why. On Letterboxd here, the movie has a 2.1. It keeps going down. So the people seem to not like the movie. But I have a whole section about criticism here. Where do we start? I guess we should briefly describe what it is to people who don't have any reference for it. But I'm drinking. So, Blonde is like this. It's obviously a Marilyn Monroe biopic. Get with the program, people. But it's fucking wacky, I'll tell you what. It's trippy, it's abstract. A lot of people compare it to a David Lynch movie, or more specifically, Fire Walk With Me, which is the Twin Peaks movie. Is there multiple Twin Peaks movies? I don't know. I haven't seen a Twin Peaks. I've never seen a David Lynch movie, in fact. Though those might be things that we definitely cover, or I would like to cover, on this wacky adventure we're about to go on. That's about to unfold. But yes, so it's very wacky, very abstract, lots of incredibly creative shot. It's like a dream-like aesthetic the whole time. It's wacky. We're going in and out of things. I guess it is told linearly, but like we jump around so much and context changes so much, and you breeze through some things, and there's some iconic imagery from like the 60s, or just Marilyn Monroe. Well, I guess she dies in 63, so it's like 50s and 60s stuff. It's some wacky shit, and obviously with some wacky shit, sometimes people don't be liking it. But we beat those people up, Lamau. So I guess it's the best way to explain it. Is it about feminism? Question mark. Now this is a bit of a point of contention, but I don't know if that's the first point I want to get into here. In my notes, I sort of ordered them in a way I would want to go down. There's so many general points I want to make connected to this movie, but in what order do we go down? Is the trifling question I'm dealing with right now. I guess we'll start with this. Now, I didn't see this beforehand. Well, actually, I guess what I knew about Marilyn Monroe going in was not a decent amount, but a little bit. I would say a little bit more than the average 21-year-old maybe would. Again, there's a lot of context for her, especially in the early seasons of Mad Men. I feel like I've somehow learnt bits and pieces about her, maybe just through like old Hollywood YouTube videos or something talking about her and things like that. Marilyn Monroe, obviously one of the most famous people of all time. I'm sure there were just little bits in school when she would come up and be explained. Actually, I remember a very specific example, because in grade 11 when we were doing The Crucible, one of the first lessons was a little lesson, an introduction to Arthur Miller as an author, and I remember my 11th grade English teacher kind of being a little bit more happy to talk about Marilyn Monroe than Arthur Miller and whatever boring English shit she was teaching. She got a pep in her step when Marilyn Monroe came up. And so there was a little bit, oh, he was married to Marilyn Monroe. Crazy. Did you know that? And everybody's like, nah. But The Crucible, what a time. What a movie, in fact. I don't know if we'll be covering that on here, though. It's his name, guys. So yeah, I think that's about the range of my knowledge. So I knew a little bit about Arthur Miller, and that she was married to Arthur Miller at some point. I had no idea she was married to a baseball dude, and actually she had another marriage that wasn't featured in the movie when she was much younger. I read a little bit of the Wikipedia page actually while I was watching the movie, so I would pause it. I wasn't not paying attention, but probably not the ideal way. Movie purists would like me to have watched the movie, but nonetheless, that's what we fucking did. I don't want to be yawning throughout the recording. This isn't a Chainsaw Man chapter review. The more you talk and think about yawning, the more you'll yawn. So let's move on from that. So that's what I knew about Marilyn Monroe. Turns out this movie, not really about Marilyn Monroe. Sort of using her life and the iconography around her and the mythos around her as sort of a vehicle to tell this very particular story. Now, I think, because this isn't like what's a controversial thing we've talked about in the past? Maybe the Attack on Titan ending, where there's like splits where it's kind of obvious who doesn't and who does like it, and it's sort of like a Jaegerists don't like it, anti-Jaegerists, some of them don't even like it, and it's sort of a middle ground of people that like it because of sort of contradicting information. Eren loses, but then we're making him relatable. Oh my goodness. The Last of Us Part 2. Funnily enough, you can almost divide that into male and female and who does and doesn't like it. I noticed that whenever I click on playthrough videos of that game, you're always better going with a girl playing through it because they'll like it, and with a man, you're like running a 50-50 risk of them being morons. But even then, there's like, you can sort of tell. Or you could tell maybe between like progressive and conservative or something, like who doesn't like it, and sort of cultural values that might be influencing their thoughts about things. With Blonde, it seems to be a mix of both. I don't see a conservative audience liking this at all, but there seems to be a lot of criticism from the left, which is something I also want to talk about. But the point is, most of the one-star reviews I've seen on Letterboxd and a lot of the Twitter complaints I've seen have been from women. And I think part of that is sort of, there's like this common thing that a lot of these say about how exploitative the movie is. Now, I don't know if they're talking about as in the lead actress, who is Anna de Armas. I've never seen her in anything. Or if they're just talking about Marilyn Monroe generally. I feel like there has to be like a 10 million view YouTube video about Marilyn Monroe, or maybe there are just like a million documentaries about her, and everybody sort of fell in love with her, and therefore this movie, like using it as sort of a basis to tell this story, but not really making it about a truthful retelling of Marilyn Monroe's story or whatever, might have offended those people. And I think there's a lot of people that are just like, let her rest or something, because they don't like movies being made about her at all, because it's disrespectful to her memory or whatever, or that she suffered so much in life that we should just let her rest or something. Like she's being affected by the movie somehow 40 years or more since she died. Wait, it's like 60 years. Holy fuck, we're in the 2020s. She died 60 years ago next year. In a few months, in fact. Actually, I don't know what month she died in. I was just thinking when we get to 2023. Don't let that existential crisis seep in. But it's been wacky nonetheless. Now, there are trappings where I'm like, yep, people definitely wouldn't like this. People probably wouldn't like this. I can see people being dumb about this, and that popped up a bunch of times throughout the movie, but nonetheless, I liked every single bit of it. It was great. This all plays into the little quote here that is actually a headline of an article. I actually didn't read the article in too much, and I only first saw this in a YouTube video, I think the Taylor J. Williams YouTube video, which I thought was pretty shit about the movie, but where it's a quote from Andrew Dominik, the director, saying, "I'm not interested in reality, I'm interested in images." And when I saw that, I was like, yes, he gets it. He gets his own movie. What a champion. Like, this is exactly an embodiment of how I felt coming out of this movie. This movie is about feelings, guys. You know how the everybody, I guess, the Red Letter Media videos play, like the videos making fun of Star Wars, and how everybody goes, it's like a family, guys. That's what I'm like, but with this movie and with feelings. It's about feelings, guys. That's what this movie is about. It's such a feel fest. You just feel it and you go on the journey. What's happening doesn't matter. The fact that it's all disorientating doesn't matter at all. It's just a feeling that continues throughout. Now, I see a lot of people also complaining about this, about like it's such like suffer porn or whatever. It's like the weeb community has a name for this, cry porn. They'll talk about what's the one show? Clanad being like cry porn, and there are other shows like that where like just everything bad happens. I guess it's kind of like that. I didn't really come away from the movie with like this depressive haze. It was sort of like this melancholic joy, I guess. But I'm going to get into that in much more detail later. The note I have under the quote that I just read: this movie is not reality, nor is it trying to be. Marilyn has an accent, her speaking patterns. Now, the first thing is, I think I'm going to assume, because the movie's made in America, that it's a Mexican actress. Or it could be a Spanish actress. I don't know. I don't know anything about Europe or South America, all right? I'm in an island in the middle of the Pacific, all right? I know these New Zealanders, and that's it. Not that I'm from New Zealand. Don't get that twisted. They're just the closest neighbours, if you can call them that, as I spit on them from my window. There's a day in the middle, which is like Black Sails, bro. But that's Spanish stuff. But the Spanish colonized Mexico, I'm pretty sure. And that's why they speak Spanish in Mexico. And shut the fuck up. We get the point. She has an accent. Marilyn Monroe, I'm pretty sure, was a white girl. Though I think I read on her Wikipedia page that her mother, like, was in Mexico or something, or maybe she was Mexican. So maybe it's not entirely unfounded. But in the audio clips I think I've seen of, or I guess heard, from Marilyn Monroe, she didn't have an accent. But the way she speaks in the movie is like a very specific thing. It's just sort of it's sort of using the mythos of Marilyn Monroe to tell like the story of the plight of women, especially in the 50s/60s, especially women in like entertainment industries, but just generally. Like we see a lot of patriarchal things in this movie, like when she first goes into Reed in one of the very first scenes, and it's just like the image of like a 50s like tycoon patriarch. Movie tycoon patriarch just sitting there in his like leather chair, like smoke coming out of his fucking cigar. And it's like these are the people that run the world still, but especially then with sort of much less repute, much less discretion, much less nothing could touch these people back then. And this is sort of reiterated into a bunch where there are sort of patriarchal figures around her, or patriarch. I don't know. Patriarchal, I think whenever you say that, you think you're talking about societal issues, but I'm just talking about like individuals here mostly, though these are very systemic issues. But I guess I should go. I feel like I want to go into the feminist point first. Now, because we sort of started to go into it, and we sort of went over the "it's not trying to be reality" thing. Actually, should I keep going here? Things are dramatized out of the out the arse to the point where most people are calling it exploitative. Then, and a lot of things. And I did watch this Taylor J. Williams video, which did like everything I hate about video making and everything I hate about media criticism. One of the questions is like, well, if you're going to change all these things and not sort of relate it specifically to the Marilyn Monroe like mythos or whatever, or sort of be exploitative, I'm doing the quotation marks here with my fingers, then why do a biopic? And the response to that, I think, is like to hit people where it hurts. That's why, like this mythos that already exists, that already has is already perceived a certain way in society. I feel like Marilyn Monroe's is like a tragic, beautiful story or something, I think would be how most people would like describe it. Like she had it all, but she was still so lonely. When that, how it's portrayed in this movie is not like that at all. It's just sort of suffering on top of suffering in a cruel world where she feels very lonely all throughout as she encounters people and moves on, and sort of inherited mental illness almost. But yeah, and I think that's part of the point. Like this existing part of the zeitgeist to be twisted and made real in this crazy way, and to map it onto societal issues and things like that. What a movie! What a concept! I'm in love. The movie is about feelings, and I got a happy, sad feeling from the movie. This is a talking point I've been talking about quite a bit recently, which is maybe Berserk has ruined me. Because a lot of people, and I saw this recently with Chainsaw Man, a lot of people being like, man, at the start, it's Chainsaw Man, and then towards the end, it's Painsaw Man, and they're like sad about Chainsaw Man, like something sad happens in Chainsaw Man. A lot of people die in Chainsaw Man, but really, it doesn't fucking matter, and you don't feel that bad, pussy. And I kind of feel that way coming out of this movie, where everybody's like, it's just hateful, like in that J tweet, or that it's miserable constantly, and it's just like, it's not really, like, it is sad. You feel for Marilyn Monroe. I like the portrayal, or Norma Jean. I feel sympathy for her. I like her a lot in the movie. I find her relatable in the movie. But like, I feel like all of the terrible things that happen to her, like, there's an effort made to make it not extremely uncomfortable. Like, as I phrased it here, nothing's made me too uncomfortable in this movie. The rapes and the beatings aren't lingered on. Like, one of the first scenes after we cut from the kid stuff at the beginning, where she's an adult now, is her getting raped in the office by the tycoon I was alluding to earlier, with the cigar sitting behind the desk on the leather chair. But the way it's shot, it's supposed to make it feel gross, not like miserable, I think. Like the Eclipse rape scene, or even like the Sansa rape scene in Game of Thrones, or things like that, where it's like the point isn't the rape, it's sort of the toll it takes on the person, and like that toll is not being made on the viewer, because it's like 20 minutes in and you're not going to be as emotionally invested in this character as you are in Casca or Sansa or this is another rape in Game of Thrones, right? But whatever. And then the beating scenes from her I guess her second husband, but her first husband in the movie, the baseball dude, like a monologue starts nearly immediately, like you can hear her like getting hit in the background, but it's not like as visceral as like any other like woman beating scene, where it is very, very uncomfortable to watch, like any of the Sopranos ones with Chris and Aide, where it's like it goes on for quite a while, and of course you're made to like Christopher at certain points, so it's like it's like much more it hits you harder that he's the one doing it. Even the one in the farmland arc of Vinland Saga is another example of one that's like very, very uncomfortable. And obviously she dies in that scenario. There are other ones too. But none of this is lingered on. And even they tease like it with the stuffed animal stuff that is also like a tear jerking moment. I don't know, stuffed animals and kids with stuffed animals in stories. Now that'll fuck me up. But even then, they don't linger on it or make it too sad. Like all of her suffering is like, there's like it's not handled in like a dramatic like gut punch way, though it is a gut punch. It's just like an understated sort of melancholic, like it's almost in rhythm or something. It's hard to describe, but it feels it's sort of like a this is the way things are type of suffering, rather than an extreme. I don't know, I guess those moments make me more uncomfortable in things because they seem so out of the norm or something, whereas you're sort of lulled into misery, I guess, from the beginning. But even then, it's sort of, I don't know, there's like a willful carry-on or something. A wistful carry-on? I don't know. This movie is, like, when I think back to it, I'm not, like, scared to rewatch it. I don't feel depressed watching it. It's a different feeling. Maybe it's also because it's so abstract. But I guess people would say that it's like a bad thing that these things are portrayed and not portrayed in that way. Though there's also similar schools of thought that these things just shouldn't be shown at all. I feel like if you, like, even with the Sansa example, like, people still are mad about that. And not even from, there's like two separate camps that are mad about that. The people mad about that for Sansa's character and sort of how it undermines. Clearly they changed directions from the end of season 4 into season 5 when they decided to give her the Jane Poole storyline, etc., etc. And then there's sort of a school of people that just, I feel like it made them deeply uncomfortable, and they're like, I just don't want to see a rape scene that's like this dramatic or something like that. I feel like that second group could also be very mad at this movie for those things, for just portraying them at all. Now, I don't know if I was going to say I don't know if anybody agrees with those people, but obviously they do. But and there's also a moment towards the end with the letter and the return of the stuffed toy, by the way. Totally called in my head that it was going to be the stuffed toy, that the one dude from the throuple that didn't die, that didn't choke to death, would send her. I was like, yeah, it's going to be that, and she's going to cry, and it's going to be sad. But also the reveal that they were fucking with her the whole time, and that there was no tearful father, and then her, like, outburst scream at that. Incredible stuff. But I feel like there's something of a release in that moment. I don't know, maybe if that moment didn't happen, I would be sitting here more miserable and being like, yeah, it is all those things that people were saying it was. But it feels like such a release in that moment of her suffering, I guess. But I don't know, there's just a weird feeling where it's not like, because throughout the whole movie, I feel like you're supposed to, or at least this is what I thought, was like the father letters are obviously too good to be true, and you're sort of lightly hopeful that, like, oh, this could be true for Marilyn and she could be happy, but you, like, sort of know that's not going to happen. And there's like a child-parent relationship between you and Marilyn almost, where there's like a, there's like, you can tell that she's like being silly or something. Like, obviously this isn't going to happen, but you like, so you sort of want the truth to be laid bare to her so she can like work through it or something. It's a very strange relationship that's built, I think, between Marilyn and the audience in this movie. Sort of unlike anything else I ever saw. So all very interesting stuff. I think the overall explaining of why I like this movie so much will be difficult. It will be a lot of vagary stuff, but that's because it's about the feelings, bro. And you just got to feel the feelings. And the feelings feel good. They feel so good. So here we are. But yes, her stream after the reveal that there was no tearful father is such a release. Also, it makes those two dudes seem like the worst people to ever exist. It's sort of like a final punch to her when she's so lonely. We'll get into all of the loneliness talk later. The last line of my notes here is, I don't know how it did it, but it connected with my sadness. And I thought about that a lot. Maybe it's just because I think like, I think I found with a bit of self-reflection, drink break, hold on, that the moments that I like the most in media are weird descriptive moments where I'm like, where I point at the screen and sort of subconsciously it feels like you're being seen. It feels like you're connecting with the piece. It's like, you're looking at it and you're like, oh my God, that is how I perceive reality right there. And something about this movie did that with me. There's, obviously recently I've been geeking out over House of the Dragon, been loving it. But for those two episodes, for episodes 6 and 7 that I really didn't like, there was just something missing, like, from a connection there. And then it came back in episode 8, like the Viserys speech at dinner, and it's just like, this is everything. This is perfect. And there are certain things in the show where it's like, yes, this is how, like, I don't even want to say this is how I would react in this situation, but this is like fits my perception of how people are like, or my descriptive philosophy of what people are like. And you point and sort of the acknowledgement and the acknowledgement back, and you being on the same pace with somebody, some author somewhere creating this. It's like, I think that's like the best feeling when watching something. I used to use the descriptive word a lot when talking about things, like just how different just every story in the world is descriptively in their attempts to like describe reality or re-describe their reality through their stories or their manga or TV shows or anime or movies or video games. And it's there's a few that connect the most, right? And those are usually your favorite things. I think Neil Druckmann writing is like that for me, with like The Last of Us Part 2, etc., or Uncharted 4. Berserk, I used to talk about that all the time with the like I loved how much nuance there was in a bunch of the characters in Berserk, and bad guys having little redeemable qualities and things like that. I love that shit, and I've been talking about that with the House of the Dragon thing a lot. Something this movie didn't have, I guess it did, just in people being terrible. It's sort of like, oh, that's how people are, bro. That's how they are. And it sort of resonates with you. But it was more just a feeling. And I think the loneliness thing might connect the most with me, but there is just a general feeling where it's like, it's tapping into something here and it's staying on this. And obviously I have a love for sort of abstract bullshit, even just for the sake of abstract bullshit. And I feel like every time it did that and it hit the beats, it was like I was perfectly on track, and I was like, I was one with the film. I was feeling it. I was feeling the emotions, and it connected. And what else could you ask for? So I think, again, we touched on some of the feminist stuff, but I guess we'll delve more into this. But I'm skipping the criticism part. Or will I? Will I make an attempt to skip something and then go through it again, just like I just did? I'm just kind of talking about this Taylor J. Williams video that I didn't like, trying to determine what the movie is doing, then judging it by those parameters criticism, which is my least favorite type of criticism. And then he had a stupid point about the black and white and the aspect ratio thing, where he thought it was silly that he tried to match like these iconic real life pictures To how because the movie is shot and sometimes it's black and white, sometimes the aspect ratio shifts and things like that. It's supposed to mirror like the images, like famous images and how they looked, whether or not they were taken in black and white or color or what aspect ratio or something. Honestly, I didn't even realize, like when I saw the movie, I'm like, oh, this is in 4:3. That's interesting. And then obviously at some points I noticed that was black and white, but I honestly didn't notice every time. Like it would shift and I would just not even register. I would just be too enthralled to even notice. But I remember making a big deal about that and being like, oh, why are you trying to recreate reality if you don't, if like you're not interested in reality, you're interested in images. It's because those are the images. But I just thought it was all stupid. Oh, and then and this is another thing I've seen a lot with the criticism stuff, is there's like two things that, and he made fun of both of them in this video. Made fun of them. He wasn't being like a dumb YouTuber. He was being very stoic about it, which might have pissed me off even more. He made fun of a Bobby Cannavale tracking shot. I think the character's name is Gigi, the baseballer. It's played by the dude from Boardwalk Empire. Oh my god, how am I forgetting the name of the character he plays in season 3 of Boardwalk? Oh no. Gyp Rossetti, can you believe it? What a performance he has in that one. But here he is. He's also in The Irishman. I remember. He's probably in a million fucking things. Honestly, I know Marilyn Monroe supposedly was also hooking up with a mob dude in Chicago, so I assumed, because I'm a racist against Italians, that he was going to be playing that character. Because I think I knew that the president was in it beforehand. So those are like her famous hookups: the president and the one mobster dude, and then her marriage to Arthur Miller. But that never happened in the movie. I don't know if that's fake. That could be something I'm making up and I've just absorbed falsely through osmosis, tricking myself and connecting it to something that's completely unrelated. But anyway, there's a shot of him like running into the house where it's like a tracking shot and it's like odd, and it is weird, but like everything in this fucking movie is weird. Like that's part of the point. So to like single that out, especially potentially to an audience that hasn't seen the movie, and to like mock it as being like bad because it's goofy, when like there's literal like crowd shots of people having like Snapchat filter big mouths, which works. I'm not making fun of that shot either. I think it's great, but like the wacky zaniness of I don't know if zaniness is the right word at all, but I don't even know if wacky is, but the abstract nature of like the shots and fooling with things like that is like, it's like the drawing card of the fucking movie. That's the aesthetic, that's the presentation. So to make fun of that one shot, which you could like clip that out and put it as a Twitter thing and say, Lamau blonde, pretty shit, huh? And it would get like 100,000 likes, because of course it would, because Twitter is fucking garbage. I haven't seen if that's happened. This is something I'm saying that could be done. Like taking it and removing it from the context, it's just like, ugh, that was stupid. It completely worked for me in the movie. And then the talking fetus stuff. Now this gets into some of the feminism stuff and some abortion-related potential problematic stuff that we'll get into later. But a lot of people, like this is another scene where she's literally talking to a baby fetus, and the baby fetus is talking back, that you could clip this on Twitter and easily make fun of it. And I have seen a lot of people making fun of it, like, Lamau, remember that talking baby fetus? Lamau. When it entirely works. And like the whole point is that she's not even actually talking to the baby. She like the voice is of her when she's younger, and her whole like apprehension around having a baby is around her thinking she could become like her mother and mistreat it, and this is all tied into like her childhood trauma. And I don't know, to reductively make this about how she feels guilty about abortion because secretly the movie is pro-life, whereas pro-life leanings or something, is like the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. Like, and even then, if this movie was exactly the same, but like it had a pro-life message, are we really going to write off the whole movie? This sort of gets into a whole fucking different conversation, and not even the abortion conversation, because who cares about that? A lot of people. That was a jest. for the record, I'm not pro-life, but but a whole different, like, whether or not, I feel like if you ask people, generally, removed from any specific situation, if, like, not a correspondent, but a prerequisite for you liking a movie is whether or not it agrees with your politics, I feel like everybody would say, like, no, I can be the better man, the better woman, and put that to the side. But I feel like if this movie had lent into any pro-life things, like, everybody on BreadTube would shit on it. And they wouldn't just shit on it for being problematic, they would never separate it. It would always be like, the movie is shit. Like, they would make a video about how problematic Blonde's pro-life stance is, and they would threaten to just talk about the abortion in it, but they would also tack in that the whole movie is bad somehow, and not even because of it, they would just take pot shots in the movie. I hate that type of criticism. I hate, like, connecting, like, and this is completely out of the dark because I haven't seen them, but I've heard, is it Sean and Jen that made, like, Harry Potter videos, and it's like, he's talking about J.K. Rowling being problematic, which is fine, but I think I think it's a he. I don't think I've ever watched a Sean and Jen video, but this is how it was described to me in the Discord. Like, they take pot shots at Harry Potter, like, not making sense or something, or, like, while they're talking about her being problematic about abortion issues, they might bring up, like, house elf slavery and the morality surrounding that, which I'm pretty sure I've seen debunked a few times of people just saying, well, now they want to be slaves, that's pretty problematic, or something like that. I hate that type of tacked on criticism to, like, a political issue, where it's just like, because it like shrouds your dumb art opinions in this political armor that, if attacked, you can, like, reverse accuse somebody of being, like, anti-woman because they're anti-abortion because they criticize your opinion on Blonde or something like that. And I can just see the cavalcade of fucking fuckery from a mile away. But anyway, the point there was, like, the movie wouldn't be bad if it was pro-life. Like, are those Ben Shapiro movies that I also haven't seen bad because they're bad, because the acting is bad, or because the camera work is bland or something like that? Or is it just bad because Ben Shapiro made a movie and you don't like Ben Shapiro or something? It's like, I think we can all be adults here and not be so fucking cringe. But anyway, the fetus stuff is great. Plays into all the psyche stuff, like the thing that's been haunting her the whole movie, connecting it back to the beginning with her mother, and the scene with the doctor where she, like, is, like, kind of freaking out and is, like, worried that the schizophrenia that her mother has is, like, hereditary, because she feels like she's going insane, and sort of maybe connecting that to the plight of women and being like, of course a single mother would go insane. Look at the world she has to live in and things like that, and Marilyn sort of progressively getting more and more addicted to drugs as she, I think they're opiates, as the movie continues, and slowly sort of losing it as well. And it all ties in. Look at what the world has done to them. Which would be part of the plight of women and make the film feminist, I would think. But I'm sure there are a million readings on the movie. And I haven't seen any BreadTube defense pieces or hit pieces really yet, but give them time. They'll come, I'm sure. I think I must have mentioned the Fire Walk With Me David Lynch comparisons a lot. I saw, like, because I did read the responses to that Jay from Red Letter Media tweet about how actually these movies are different and Blonde is terrible because I think her name is Laura. I think it starts with an L. But in Twin Peaks, like, I think that movie is about her sort of suffering the whole time and then dying at the end or something. I know, vague spoilers for Twin Peaks. And the tweet was like, well, at least Fire Walk With Me respected Laura, unlike this movie with Marilyn. And it's sort of like, what? It's just like, first of all, respecting them is not a prerequisite for something being good or bad. Second of all, I don't agree that it's not respectful just because she suffers a lot on screen or something. This also gets into a whole different thing about, like, I think sexuality just makes people go insane. I think any sort of sexualization, like, it's sort of registered with people. As much shit as Anita Sarkeesian got 10 years ago or whatever when she was doing this, all of her criticisms have sort of become universal, or at least the general stance of her criticisms. Like, every Sony first-party game has a minority lead now. We're winning. Like, even GTA or whatever, the most sexist video game to ever exist, according to Anita 10 years ago, I think the next one is going to have a female protagonist, right? Like, and I don't know, we don't see too many damsels that much anymore, like just generic damsels in distress, or they are like torn to pieces. Like, those talking points have manifested, even if I'm pretty sure Anita Sarkeesian would still be pretty widely hated if you did like an opinion poll or something. I feel like everybody agrees with her now, almost everybody. I'm sure there's, and I'm going to make a reference to another person whose videos I don't watch. I'm sure the critical drinkers of the world are still mad about it or something. But largely, I feel like especially people in industry have definitely like just accepted those sorts of talking points. Now, why did I bring this up, and what were we going to? And because of that, a lot of that talk was about the sexualization of characters, right? Like, there's like the one shot of Catwoman from one of those Batman games, and her ass is just swaying, or Lara Croft, Lamau. Tomb Raider 1, what a video game. But yes, but on the reverse end of this, there's almost like a male feminist thing now, that like whenever like a woman is naked, like they freak the fuck out, like idiots. It's sort of like adopting the aesthetic of the opinion, but not actually like understanding it at all, and then just parroting it to seem cool. It's like, I don't know. There's Marilyn is topless a lot in this movie, but like not once was I like, man, this is so sexy. She's like topless. Look at her boobs. It's always like, it's like the same thing with like all of the trauma and all the things that are done to her, where it's just sort of like, it's almost gross. It's almost like, this feels like bad to be looking at, almost. But this is also building up into a general point about sexuality and sex scenes, where there is a certain segment of the male audience that will lose their shit if like the female main character is submissive at all in a sexual situation. This happened in The Last of Us Part 2, where I'm convinced that the only, we still stand I think it was Alana Pierce, or was it, I always get Alana Pierce and Naomi Kyle mixed up, because Naomi Kyle has my name, but Alana Pierce is from my country, and I'm always confused which one's which. But it is Alana Pierce. She's the Australian one. Now, I'm pretty sure she is the one that tweeted this about the Abby scene in The Last of Us Part 2, where she's like, if you don't like the scene, you're a virgin or whatever, which is, she got so much shit for that tweet, but we stand Lamau. Where I think a lot of men can sort of, they can deal with they can relate to a female main character as long as they are sort of masculinized in the way, well, Abby's whole point in that game is that she's actually the feminine one, and Ellie's sort of the masculine one, but their like visual appearances differ because their goal's different, and Abby was just doing it as like an outlet for her grief and to get revenge. Last of Us Part 2, ladies and gentlemen, greatest video game of all time. Nonetheless, there's a threesome scene. I'm just thinking about the transition now from the cover to the waterfalls, to Niagara Falls, greatest thing I ever saw. But I feel like there's sort of like a disgust that comes with this, and I don't know, and I feel like it is like the meeting of sort of a male feminist lens and just like a general like, I can't relate to a female main character that's getting double teamed like this, disgusting or something. And they just sort of freak out, and I feel like that happened with Abby a lot, where a lot of people made fun of that sex scene. Initially they tried to do the Neil Druckmann fetish thing or something like that. But I feel like it just makes men uncomfortable to think of themselves as submissive at all, or to relate to a character and then be submissive. Like, they're allowed to we're allowed to have like cool female action heroes like in Aliens or something, but as long as she is like one of the boys and not being exploring her sexuality at all. Even like Brienne of Tarth is kind of like that. She has sex with Jamie at the end, but by then it's everything's falling apart around that. To focus on that would be weird. But I feel like sexuality and exploring that also just makes people a little insecure and uncomfortable, especially when it's like a threesome scene or something like that, where there's just sort of actually connecting this to The Last of Us Part 2 again, a lot of the drug stuff in that game seems to have also set a lot of people off. And I think that's just because that it's almost a FOMO of it, like the fear of missing out, where it's sort of like, well, I've never done this, so it freaks me out. It's like I'm confronted with the fact that I wouldn't know what to do in this situation, and there's sort of a disconnect there. And the drug stuff in The Last of Us Part 2 did that too. And I remember having these thoughts about all these different things, about drug scenes in movies, especially, or sex scenes in movies with teenagers, specifically in like high school movies, when I wasn't getting to do those things, and it was like, oh, it is a weird FOMO effect. I feel like that's happening a lot in this as well. But again, like the sexualization, if this is a criticism in this movie, is like insane to me. Like it's, this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot recently too, where it's like, in like my favorite TV shows, in which there are pretty actresses playing pretty women in it, there's never like a waifu dynamic like there is in anime, where it's like, oh my god, she's perfect, I love everything about her. Like, in all of my favorite shows, like, there's never a fantasy of like being with one of those characters, because you like get to know them so well that it's like there's too many red flags, and it's like, this is not going to end well. Like Eleanor or Max, those are two very attractive girls in Black Sails. Like, in a fantasy world, I don't want to go near them with a 10-foot pole, alright? These two girls are trouble. They'll get you killed. They're no good. I feel the same way with Mad Men, where every woman in Mad Men is like the prettiest woman you ever saw in your life. I know what the casting department was doing. They all have the bluest eyes. Like Joan, like no. Like, none of these are fantasies. Peggy, no. Maybe Jane. But she's not even in the show that much. There's sort of like a familiarity that you get with characters that like are fleshed out and three-dimensional, where it's almost like an inherent turn-off of like, there's too much of this person, I don't want to get close. And I feel like this is done with Marilyn in this movie. Like, obviously the actress is very pretty. It's Marilyn Monroe. It's the archetype of Marilyn Monroe, supposedly like the most attractive woman to ever exist. But even then, like, there's at no point in the movie where I'm like, yeah, in like horny thoughts at anything. Even when the sex scenes and everything are happening. It never really feels like that. So I don't know if that's a criticism. If so, it's pretty fucking stupid, bro. What did I have on my feminist note here? Feminism or not feminism? That is the question. God, I'm a fucking poet in these notes. I think this movie is about the plight of women and how they were treated, especially in the 50s/60s. Marilyn is smart and has things to say. Quoting Sopranos. Sopranos is like that too. Very pretty girls all around. Sopranos girls look more normal, I guess, than Mad Men girls or something like that. But again, it's like, Meadow, are you kidding me? This fucking girl's insane. You don't want to go there. Marilyn is smart and she has things to say. She is learned. What a word I'm using. But she's almost always ignored, except with Arthur Miller. But even then, it's a little bit. So there are multiple scenes. I guess a big part of Marilyn's characterization, now I'm sort of going on a tangent as I'm thinking about this more, is sort of her naivety, where it's sort of like, in the very first scene we have of adult Marilyn, at least I think this is the first scene, where she goes into said patriarch that I've described about 3 times in this video, into his office. She goes to like read for a role, obviously, but like, the second she starts reading, like, he just touches her head and bends her over and pulls her skirt down. And she continues reading the lines as it's happening, because wacky abstract stuff, not literal. And it's very stylized and everything. But it's like, yeah, you got the part or whatever after he's done. And we cut back to this even later when she's having dinner on a first date, I'm assuming, with Bobby Cannava's character, and he asks her, like, how did you get your start? And then she has a flashback to this and just getting raped in the office, and her answer to him, because obviously she can't tell him that, is then he'll not be interested at all, which is something we'll get into in masculine pride stuff later. But yeah, she says to him, like, oh, I guess I was just discovered or something. It's like, oh, what an awful time this is. So with that opening scene, right, she's sort of the naivety, like, it's not naivety, it's like, her attempt to do things the right way, I guess, or her attempt to prepare and be good, which is undermined by her like attractiveness and the desire men have for her, is almost the most sad thing there. It's sort of like there's like a famous video of, I think it's Rick Ross or whatever, and he's having like auditions for female singers or something, and like the one girl comes in and is a really good singer, but she's all like petite, and the one girl with like the fake boobs and the fake butt comes in and she really can't sing at all, but he like entirely gives her the job and is like, yeah, I want to hang out with the other one more, and go on dates or whatever. And it's just like, oh, it's just like this patriarch who has all the money choosing the one he wants to fuck more than the talented one. And it's endearing to the audience that Marilyn is like practiced and like knows these things and like has clearly read all the lines and is ready to do them well. And for that to just be undermined by like, yeah, I'm gonna fuck you and then you're gonna get the role, and it's completely irrelevant whether or not you're good or not. It's just like the worst. And this happens multiple times. Like she goes to read for I think a movie she does end up getting. I actually have never seen a Marilyn Monroe movie, which is obviously something we could cover on this series. But she goes to read for one, and there's like and there's no rape in this scene, but it's another scene explicitly about sort of this casting couch sexism stuff. She goes to read, and it's like about a crazy woman, and it's clearly like clearly a parallel to her mother. From the beginning of the movie and like the first 20 minutes, that's exploring their relationship, and it's like a crazy woman who's a single mother who's trying to entice men, but like the kid keeps getting in the way and she hates the kid because of it. I think at the end of that scene, Marilyn's like, actually no, this character is me too, which shows sort of her fears and her sort of acceptance that she's going to be like her mother no matter what, and sort of the sadness that comes with that, and sort of how that fear sort of undermines her, or manifests in undermining all of her pregnancies throughout the movie. All 3 of them, I believe. Where are we building with all this? Oh, she's reading this role. And she's doing like an incredible job. And then like she leaves. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll be in touch. And then sort of the guys start to... Oh, actually, before this, she's like, oh yeah, I read Tchaikovsky or something, which is like a literature, it's like psychological literature or something, and like the dude behind the camera, because I don't think you see behind the camera, you just see her until later, and the dude behind the camera is just clever framing, I'm explaining, all right? And the guy behind the camera ends up saying like, oh yeah, Toots, you read Tchaikovsky or whatever, like just invalidating all the research she did and like everything for the role, and like how she might have something to say about this, but it's just like completely undermined because they're like, yeah, whatever, shut up and read the lines. And then as she's leaving after she does a performance, it brings her to tears. It's like a good performance. They're sort of just making fun of it and like, man, it wasn't like good in an acting way. It was like I was watching a psych patient or something. And then like the boss is like sitting there all regal, like he's Don Draper, and he like gets up and walks away and watches her leave, and they're like having this big speculation about whether or not it was good or not, or whether or not to give her the role. And like he finally speaks, and you're like, oh, maybe he'll have something poignant to say when he finally speaks. And his line is just like, as he's watching her walk away, like, look at the ass on that white girl or something. And then it cuts, and it's like, oh, well, that's why she gets the part. And again, I guess this is like the sexualizing thing, because they do have shots like that where they track her butt with the camera, and I guess you could be like, oh, that's exploitative, or like, how can you criticize the sexualizing of the character while sexualizing her? Which I think defeats the entire purpose. Like, she has to be hot to be sexualized, and you have to, like, the ideal male response to this is you're always going to see that she's attractive, but not to dehumanize her entirely just because of that, and to actually like treat them as a human. By them I mean women, because it's so easy to like separate them, like, oh, a non-sexualized woman is easy to respect, but if she's sexualized, she can't be respected or something. It's sort of an admitted sexism, like you just self-reported. sexism through that criticism. I hate that criticism, and it's in everything. Now, obviously, there can be bad things about that. Or if at the end of the movie they like shook your finger in your face and said sexualizing is bad, but they spent the whole movie doing it. But like that scene is clearly like it's from his like what he's seeing. And there's also tracking shots that almost directly out of Mad Men. Not that Mad Men invented them. I'm sure they've been in other things where it's just her walking through the restaurant and every single guy looks at her and like it's almost an acknowledgement of her that they're looking at her. There's a few scenes in Mad Men exactly like that, where especially there's one in season 1 where Peggy walks through the office and like no, actually she's sitting down, I think, and like she's just watching guys walk past her all day, and they all do like a sly smile or a nod or a creepy stare, and it's just like, ugh, it's just like the plight of women. Can you believe it? And it just feels gross. But yeah, like this all plays into that, and then there's other things later where I feel like in the Bobby Cannavale scene she says some smart stuff, but he like it completely ignores her, and like he isn't too turned on when she has like a monologue about how she wants to like leave Hollywood because the acting isn't as good or something. She has a monologue about how in cinema they just chop you up, and she wants to do like Broadway or something where you can just act the whole time. There's no cuts or cameras or anything like that. And he's sort of kind of sitting there disinterested. Because initially in the scene, it's like a build up throughout the scene. Initially he's like enamored to be on like a date with Marilyn Monroe, and then she like starts complimenting him and he's falling for it like a dumb guy. She's not doing too maliciously or anything like that. That was a bit extreme of rhetoric from me to describe the scene. But it's not until at the end she like becomes the traditional female archetype and says that she just wants to settle down that he like sort of starts smiling and is like super turned on. But that whole relationship is doomed. Like when the scene where she goes back to the hotel and she's expecting a visitor and she's expecting it to be her tearful father who's been sending her notes. God, the anxiety in that scene of her walking up and you're like wanting it to be real just for her so she can be happy, but secretly knowing that there's no way, this is way too good to be true, and it's going to be like some dude that's just going to... I initially thought it was going to be Kennedy in there, and it would be their first meeting, and it would be like her sexual exploitation through him. But no, it's the Bobby Cannavale character who asks her to marry him. And she's like disappointed. She's like, "Oh, it's you." And then he asks her to marry her, and she says like, "I guess," or something. But it's understated enough where it's not like stupid that he doesn't pick up that she isn't into it. And then him sort of forcing the kiss on her, and it's just like, what a bad relationship. How terrible it would be to be a woman. Especially in the 50s/60s. Now, we were talking about her being smart. Now, eventually this comes into the Arthur Miller conversation where they're on a very similar first date in a restaurant somewhere, which is a very clear parallel to that Bobby Cannavale scene I was just talking about. And in that one, initially she's sort of... she connects it to like another piece of literature, and initially Arthur Miller is like defensive, thinking that she's like accusing him of being derivative, and he almost has a monologue prepared to like retort her, but she's like, "No, I've always wanted to play that girl that this character is like, so I'd like to play this." And initially he's like Marilyn Monroe, and he's sort of like a bit uppity, though he's clearly taken aback by how pretty she is and everything, love at first sight and all that stuff. Though he is making fun of a guy in front of him for being in love with her and things like that. Their interactions are much cuter and much more genuine, it seems. But even then, like, her being smart initially, like, turns him off a little bit because he thinks she's criticizing him. So it's sort of repeated that, like, her intelligence or her insight or her criticisms, potentially, of men or her preparation is, like, always undermined. Like, she could be smart. Like, it's not like she's just, like, a dumb blonde who doesn't know anything and is just pretty or something. Like, she clearly is smart, but she just has no outlet for her intelligence and is just put into, like, these sexist squares where she can't really get out of them, and she's trapped where she has to be this sex icon. But later, like, her pointing out that, like, I think Manda is the name that the Arthur Miller story is about or something, where Manda's perfect and she's infallible, and it's clear because Arthur Miller has this, like, idea of Manda in his head, and her pointing out to him that in a moment in the play that is clearly derivative of a moment in his real life, where Manda, this woman, was like reading something the character, who is obviously an allegory for Arthur Miller, had written, and she says how great it is, and it fills him with like the confidence to do everything he's done and become Arthur Miller. And Marilyn points out that she couldn't speak English, or she couldn't read English, so she actually never read it or something like that. And initially I was like, oh no, this is going to send him off and he's going to be unhappy about that, but he like starts crying or whatever, and sort of appreciates her intelligence in that moment. But again, it's sort of repeatedly shown that she prepares for things, she researches for things, she's smart, but it's always undermined by the people around her. And even like the pay gap is brought up a bunch of times, where she's mad that she isn't getting paid nearly as much, even though her co-stars, and nobody knows who the fuck they are in 2022, but here we are making movies themselves about Marilyn. What did I have on my note here? Marilyn is smart, she can say things, she is learned, but they're almost always ignored, except with Arthur Miller. She constantly has to placate the men around her. I put pro-life, ! Question mark, but I feel like we already talked about that. She lies and says she wants to settle down. She says that to the baseball dude, Bobby Cannava's character. You think it's Canalave, like the Pokemon town where everybody thought it was Canalave, and then in the anime they started saying Canalave City. Embarrassing. Hopefully it's Canalave. That doesn't sound too Italian, and Canalave kind of does sound more Italian. Sounds more exotic. Uh-oh. That's problematic. You can't use the word exotic. Anyway. She has to placate the men around her. She lies and says she wants to settle down. She says that to him, and it's clearly not the life for her. And then in the few scenes we see of her at like the house with him, where she's trying to be domesticated, and she's around like his family, and all the women around in the family, they all speak Italian, and they're clearly speaking Italian, shit-talking her. She doesn't know what spaghetti is, or that you can like make it and it doesn't just get bought from a store. And then she goes and like he's watching baseball and like ignoring her, and it's like, this is not the life for her. She's still so lonely. Like maybe he would get along with her, with his sister or something, but nope, they're all just making fun of her, and they're all probably insecure that Marilyn Monroe is around, and who is this uppity bitch who he married, and she's just a dumb pretty blonde, and she's nothing like us, and all this she's still treated like an outsider. Actually, a big thing in the first Bobby Cannavale scene, so much in this fucking scene, is that and this actually goes for all of her like lovers throughout the movie, I guess, except JFK, who we don't get too much of. Is she has like a little bit of relatability with each of them, like with the throuple. They're all sort of living in the weight underneath their parents, and they both believe that she's different and she's not like them, but very clearly she is living under the massive weight of her mother. They actually have like a poignant scene where they're like, we're both like, because they're both juniors. It's Charlie Chapman's son and another dude's son. And they're in a threesome relationship. If anybody's still here who hasn't actually seen the movie, who's looking for context here, what was I saying? Oh, they have a thing where like they say to like Marilyn, like, you came from nothing. We came from our fathers, so we have to be him. And it's sort of this poignant thing of like, sons usually end up becoming a lot like their fathers, even if they like try to rebel. Like in the image, or at least the image of one of your parents. Like even my brother is a lot like my mother, and I'm like a lot like my father. Everybody has said this about us since we were like 3 and 4, which is weird how they could get that read. Maybe they manifested that to be true, but it's generally true. One's louder, one's quieter. I'm the quiet one, believe it or not, even though we're here talking now. And I'm so performative and jovial. And they're it's them so self-obsessed with themselves that they don't actually see her. And that's like a continual thing with all of her lovers. Except maybe Arthur Miller, but even then it's sort of portrayed, that's like different. Then it's portrayed as like her drug addiction is getting to her and is ruining that marriage. We also don't see the breakups of the throuple and of Arthur Miller. They just sort of happen off screen, and we sort of cut, and we haven't seen them for a while, and the implication is that they've broken up. The throuple does come back continuously, and once Arthur is not there anymore, he's just sort of gone. But regardless, that monologue about how they are in the image of their fathers, always trying to live up to them, but Marilyn isn't, when obviously she is. She is in the image of her mother, and her father obviously has a lot of weight over her as well, and sort of this figment of her imagination that is her father. I'm sure that ties into somehow why they bullshit her by being the tearful father, though I am curious if I'm supposed to be taking that as literally as I am, that maybe she just imagined all the letters, because in the final scene when the letter pops up, like the text sort of materializes on the piece of paper that says like there was no tearful father, and it's like Cass, which is the dude's name, and he's dead at that point. But he sent her the stuffed thingy and the and that letter. So it could just be that this is when her delusion snaps, and like her father is never coming to save her. So sad. God, the monologue that the father voiceover gives as she's like driving the car at the end, incredible stuff. 5 fucking star movie, fucking 2 stars this shit. Can you fucking believe it? But the image of like you're born of nothing was just like, I don't know, it was a great monologue, and like the epitome of them not understanding. And the reason why I brought this up was to get back to the Bobby Cannavale scene, because they relate in that fashion, and she relates to them in sort of the way. But the point is that they don't really relate, that there is a disconnect, because the male and female plight is sort of completely different. They sort of have to live up to their father's genius, and they sort of see this as a miserable thing, where she's got to sort of try and escape her mother's like mental illness. And these things, like, they're like, oh, you have such a great life, Marilyn, you don't have to deal with these things, when really, like, she has to deal with much worse things. Now, Bobby Cannavale's character is a very famous baseball player, well, retired baseball player, but he's doing media appearances, and he's still very famous, or whatever. He's like in the papers nearly as much as she is, or something. And the point is that like they almost connect on like their shared stardom, and sort of like maybe they can relate to each other through how the media talks about them, and how they are sort of hounded by them, and they can relate to like the plight of being famous, of the celebrity stuff. That reminded me of the Broe Deschanel video, but I also forgot to bring up a different Broe Deschanel video earlier, where she was talking about when she was talking about method acting and that school of acting, and Marilyn Monroe goes to that school of acting, and they name dropped that one dude, and when I saw it, I recognized it, and it was like, that's the thing from the Broe Deschanel movie. I know everything about cinema history. I've seen Broe Deschanel videos. But yeah, that was a cute thing. But Tchaikovsky or something, that actually might be no, I think Tchaikovsky is the Nerd Writer video is about Tchaikovsky, but he's a director, and there's a different name of an author that I'm thinking of that might have been mentioned, that's mentioned in this movie instead, that was mentioned in a Broe Deschanel video. Again, I know everything about literacy history too, because I watch Broe Deschanel videos. I got like 5 to catch up on, I'm so behind. Nonetheless, that was a cute thingy. But I was thinking about the systematic abuse of celebrity thing just now, because the paparazzi is hounding them, and that's bad. I watched that video too. But the point is that they don't actually connect, because again, the plight of women is way different. Like her representation of the media and his are completely different. He's treated as like this hero, she's treated as like this bombshell sex symbol, and like the way you are treated coming off of that and the way you're perceived coming off of that are incredibly different things. And again, he only likes her when she's like saying what he wants her to say. Oh, another smart learned thing is she like writes a poem that's pretty good and then reads it to him, and he like has nothing to say about it because he's a big dumb fucking baseball player. And he just sort of pats her on the knee and is like, let's have some babies and settle down or something, because he doesn't actually love her for her. He just like is in love with the idea of marrying Marilyn Monroe and like domesticating her. And that's why he freaks out when the throuple show back up again with nude photos of her that she did when she was younger, and he beats her for it. And it's just sort of like, well, he only really cared about her as like a He didn't care about her. He just cares about her in sort of this weird fatherly way of this extension of your own masculine pride thingy, as like fathers do this, right? That's why they're so concerned with their daughter's sexuality and things like that, because they think if their daughter becomes a whore or something, or it'll reflect badly on their ego or their pride, and they'll be made fun of. Masculine fragility. What's that? There's a book about that or something. No, maybe that's white fragility. I don't know. Masculines. They're actually pretend to be all strong, but like one prick will bring them down. Like nude photos of your wife. Can you believe it? All the supposed love goes out the window in that one moment because it hurts his pride and perception of him and things like that. These men. Can you believe it? She lies and wants to get settled down, treated like a piece of meat constantly. She actually makes a joke about this. It's like the CIA guys are carrying her through like the back doors of hotels to end up with Kennedy. She has sort of this delirious monologue because she's all fucked up on drugs at this point and is going in and out of consciousness and is like, is this what I am in my room service to be delivered or whatever? But she actually says it in kind of a funny way. And even then, she's like fully delusional at this point because this is post Arthur Miller stuff. I assume they're broken up at this point, or maybe this is just an affair. Also, she like walks past Jackie crying, Jackie Kennedy, which is kind of funny as sort of what a wacky zany thing to do in this abstract movie, to just have the tears that would be caused by this affair be like thrown in her face. But yes, she even has like she's like, oh, it's the connection of our souls or something in the back seat when she's like being taken around by Secret Service people or CIA people. I don't know which one they are. People who deal with the president's shit. And she's clearly like delusional about, oh, this is like a connection of our souls. He loves me or something. When really she gets in and he doesn't even talk to her and just wants a blowjob and then starts calling her like a dirty slut and things like this. And it's like, oh, poor Marilyn in this situation again. But yeah, a piece of meat to room service to be delivered. Those sequences, though, when she is really drugged up at the end, like on the plane, and then I don't like vomit stuff, right? We didn't need that. Now that's the shit that actually got to me, unlike all the stuff I talked about earlier. But yeah, her coming in and out of consciousness, the way the camera does that, her like passing out on the plane, and then the dude in front of her taking a paparazzi shot, and then like ducking down, and it was just, gross. I'm just thinking about the Kennedy scene now and all the explosions and the saucer flying into the building because he's coming. Get it, guys? Part of being abstract is being entirely on the nose about it. There's something about that that's like, it's like the third layer of like the first layer would be, oh, this is dumb, look at how on the nose it is, and then the second layer would be, oh, look, this doesn't make no sense, it's so abstract, and the third layer of like, it is dumb. And it is on the nose, and that's why it's great, because it's abstract, and now you have to deal with whether or not this is supposed to be self-aware or not, and it just makes you think even more than the general abstraction. Genius stuff. I love dumb abstract bullshit. She's constantly coerced sexually too, whether or not it be through the president saying platitudes about loving her or their souls connecting or something. Now, initially, with the throuple, it's immediately bad vibes. She goes into an acting studio, and immediately they're trying to fuck her, and within 2 minutes, they are fucking her. But they're playing on the piano, and they are very cute boys in the most toxic way possible. So you sort of get it, and it's not like a gross old man, and they are sort of like her contemporaries. But she's like clearly being coerced sort of in that scene where they're sort of pressuring her by commenting, oh, what are you, a prude or something, as she's like not taking her clothes off as they are. But she clearly like falls for it. Now this is a big part of coercion. And I feel like in more straightforward movies where we're pointing out that coercion sexually is bad, you sort of have to make it not as coercive. It's sort of got to be entirely on the nose where they're too pressury or anything. Whereas it's more subtle, the coercion in that scene. And the fact that she does fall for it for a long time and does like fall in love with both these idiots is sort of like part of the point of like, they pretend to care about her. Maybe they do, but still they're like exerting pressures and power over her and like sympathy, using sympathy to win her over and things like that. Yeah, it's like I don't know. I like the portrayal of that. There's more to say about the throuple. We really haven't talked about them that much. At some point, one of them gets her pregnant, and they have like again, it's just like bad vibes. They're always a little off, where it's like she announces to them that she's pregnant, and then like they smile, and then it's like a creepy smile, and they look at each other, and then it's like, and she's like, be happy for me, and then they do pretend to be happy for her, or maybe they are happy, or maybe they're just fucking weird afterwards. But she does end up getting an abortion for a movie role. Because she's going to turn it down, but then she's like, it's a big opportunity, or she's going to get money or something, so that's her first abortion. We'll talk about the abortion things, because she has 2 abortions and then 1 miscarriage. The abortion later on, I guess we'll talk about them now. The second one is one of my favorite shots I think I've ever seen in a movie ever, where she's sort of, there's a scene before this, which is part of the scene where she monologues with the fetus. I think a lot of the fetus stuff is played into too, because there's like dramatic music played whenever she gets pregnant and she feels it, and she has like this, it's like this dramatic, harrowing music. But I think part of that is like her sort of internal desire to be mother, or potentially to be mothered. I'm like, this is like my way to being like a real woman, where I am settled down and things will be happy for me, as they have been promised societally for women if they settle down and get pregnant. And it always goes awry, right? The baby dies every time. In the abortion, and this is another thing that could play into like the pro-life stuff, she like has a delirious freak out while on the abortion table and tries to run away and doesn't want the abortion and says she's changed her mind a bunch. But it gets aborted anyway. I think this might be where another one of my favorite shots is, where she's like running away from the abortion, I think, as she runs back into like the burning house from the beginning with her mother. We also haven't talked about the beginning stuff with the mother too much, and that sort of abuse. That's probably the most uncomfortable stuff in the movie. I will talk about that later though, because I do have notes about it, though we are running out of battery really fast. Last time I sort of ran out of things to say. When you write down notes, I think this is how we're going to do things going forward. But yes, the second lost pregnancy is a miscarriage, where she trips over carrying things. She's like nervous. This connects to the baby monologue fetus thing, which I was going to talk about, because she sort of has to monologue to herself that no, he loves us, and this is with Arthur Miller, who comes closest to actually loving her, I'm pretty sure. But she's still clearly having second doubts and being like, no, all these men abandoned us. And she's talking to like the baby at this point, and like she doesn't want to be alone to raise the kid, because she also has fears of becoming like her mother and becoming abusive and delirious and crazy and doing to her child what was done to her. And so it's all like, it all plays in, and then she trips and she starts bleeding everywhere. There's a lot of blood. I don't know, if you have a miscarriage like that, is there that much blood, or was that an abstract like over exaggeration? I don't know. I've never been around somebody that's had a miscarriage, thankfully, through like tripping or something. But she trips over on the beach, and then she initially is like, I'm okay, and then she notices the blood, and then she starts freaking out, and then Arthur Miller, who's over with a different couple, runs back over, and he's like Norma or whatever, and it's like cute, and he's running over, but before he reaches her, like a bunch of paparazzi dudes jump out of nowhere, jump into the frame, like literally emerging out of the sand. Not literally, but like it's such an incredible shot, and like sort of the clicks of their cameras drown out his concerns and things like that. Just one of the greatest shots I've ever seen in anything. Sick. But that's all an incredible moment, and it's And then the third one is her sort of getting pregnant with the president's kid and the CIA coming to kidnap her and force her to get an abortion. And, like, she's surrounded by a bunch of men in suits with distorted faces watching to make sure that to cover up this scandal. Because when she's with JFK, he's on the phone the whole time because I think the implication is, like, the Cuban Missile Crisis is going on. But also he's, like, it's getting out that he's, like, a womanizer, as Roger says in that one Mad Men episode. And, like, he has payoffs for all these women that he's getting into trouble with. And Marilyn also overhears this and realizes, well, we're not soulmates if I'm one of many side hoes and not just the main one. And yeah, so it all plays into that. We were talking about her 3 lost pregnancies there. Somehow we haven't really brought this up yet, but daddy issues I have all in caps. She calls all of her lovers daddy all the time. Now this is obviously, like, materially in the narrative about her daddy issues. Now I could see people complaining about this, like, another like anti-feminist movie where daddy issues is the problem with the girl who's crazy. It's sort of this patriarchal girls without dads become whores or something like that, which I don't think is what it's going through. And I think a charitable reading of this societal phenomenon would ensure that this is almost certainly always the case, not with whores, but with dysfunctional people and their parental issues. I'm speaking as such a person, I believe. So, not daddy issues, though, the other one. Tony Soprano issues, if you catch my drift. But nonetheless, so as a willful participant, I was not offended. But, oh my god, we're getting the first battery warning. We got to speed through these fucking notes, the way I think we have talked about a bunch of things. But obviously this doubles contemporaneously because of the hypersexualization of the word daddy in all sorts of porn. And if you meet a girl under 23, she's obsessed with this word, especially sexually. It's increasingly become the case with younger people, probably because of porn and the porn they consume and everything. And it's a whole different conversation. But obviously it has a double with that, and when she's, like, obviously has daddy issues and she's calling every one of her lovers daddy, it's like, again, the super obvious is the abstract thing where it's actually the third layer, but you can easily see people making fun of it for the first layer. And also the implication of that in, like, the daddy word contemporaneously also I think would make people uncomfortable, which would be another source of criticism, of that sort of FOMO criticism. I like that I've connected that vague criticism I've been thinking about since I think The Last of Us 2 came out and attached FOMO to it. The fear of missing out. Maybe I'll make a video about that someday. But yes, that's also another layer to all of this plight of women feminism stuff. Men pretending to love you, but only loving you as an extension of their masculine pride, including her fake father. Her fake father monologues also lay into this when he's, like, disappointed about her, the sexualization of her in some of her movies, and also when he's like, oh, it's a shame that your marriage to the baseball dude didn't turn out because he's a star athlete, and I would have been proud of you to end up with somebody like him. And it's just, like, clearly, like, just all self-serving stuff, which I think is a lot of father and parental things. Do they actually love their kids, or do they just love bragging about their kids? And when they do things that they aren't comfortable bragging with, then you throw them away, like doing anything sexual. Again, the father obsessive over daughter sexuality thing. I already talked about the nudity not being sexy, her getting drugged on set while she can... Oh, they sort of play into, again, the female... an extension of, like, a stereotype around women is sort of that they're all fucking crazy, and she is sort of freaking out on sets, and she sort of gets drugged into sort of submission so she can do the movies towards the end. And those scenes are very uncomfortable too, and sort of terrifying, and sort of needles in the neck. Yikes. But yeah. And this is another extension of all of this stuff where she sort of becomes Marilyn Monroe by getting her makeup done. And there's sort of one scene where she sort of has this immediate transformation where she's freaking out and crying and is miserable. And then, like, in a split second, almost like a split personality, Marilyn comes in for Norma. And she is suddenly Marilyn Monroe and talking like Marilyn Monroe and performing like Marilyn Monroe in the mirror. It's sort of like, oh, she's losing it. But also makeup as an extension of power is also... and sort of like an institution that is probably bad for women overall and sort of their body image through makeup, but sort of leaning into it to feel comfortable and things like that. Makeup's a whole different conversation. But again, there's sort of hitting on a bunch of plights of women here, and the evil of the paparazzi is my last note on that one. Now we're going to speed through some themes. Parallel dinner scenes, we already talked about that. Her relating in small ways to her lovers, but ultimately being alone. Loneliness is a big theme in this movie. Now, I don't even think I've talked about the loneliness stuff. She dies alone. We haven't talked about the final shot, not like the final 20 or 30 minutes, where it's basically her alone, and it's what a vibe. The last shot of the light, picturesque image of her sprawled out with the cover covering her perfectly, which is inconsistent with the previous shot. The build-up in anticipation for her death, that's inherent because it's a Marilyn Monroe movie and we all know how she dies. And the light and the easy feeling of the initial final shot before it turns black is fucking great. The last scene is so good. Because, like, you're waiting for her to die, obviously. We're getting to the end of the movie. She's continuing to ramp up her drug use. Little dog is around. How cute. But yeah, so she sort of like falls back and she's topless again, and she just sort of like drapes herself onto the mattress, and like it's an inconsistent shot because she is topless, and then we cut to her and it's sort of an over the top shot looking down on her on the bed, and she's like perfectly covered, like it's like a photo shoot. Where like the cover is covering her boobs and everything, and it looks beautiful and all white and things like that, and it's like a picturesque image, but it's like inconsistent, so it's like this is, and it's sort of like the lasting feeling of, as you're watching this and you know the movie's coming to an end, you're like, oh, this might be the final shot, and sort of like a beautiful sad ending. And then they do the shot of the like her ceiling window screen thingy, and obviously they morph it to be like, oh, she's going up to heaven, but then we cut to sort of a shot of like her leg dangling off the bed, and it is still all light and bright, and the cameraman like physically puts the camera down. You don't see him walk off or anything. It's not that fourth wall breaky, but the camera is just sort of placed down like, oh, the movie's over. No, the cameraman is no longer required, and you just linger on the shot of like her leg hanging off the bed as it slowly goes from light to dark, and you sort of hear the ambience outside of like kids playing at a park, and then it becomes like sort of nighttime ambience, and then it fades to black, and it's like the emotions of that scene of like, oh, the journey's finally over, she's resting, the last shot is kind of picturesque, and it sort of like leaves you with this lasting like, well, it's over. And then the putting down of the camera is sort of like the actors taking a bow at the end of the stage show, but then it's sort of given this dark twist at the end as it fades to dark. And I don't know, it turns sort of the melancholy into a little bit bitterer, and I don't know, what a feeling. It's great. Incredible final shot. All the other last stuff is also so good, where it's like she's just alone, and she is then she's like kidnapped by the Secret Service guys, and then there's like images of her like getting out of bed, and there's blood all over her after she's had the abortion. It's still not literal blood, like, you know what I mean. You've seen this fucking shot, unless you haven't, and you're this far in, but but then there's like a delivery for her, which is from when she gets the call saying that the one dude from the threesome is dead, and then he's going to send a package, and she's like, no, I don't want the package, and great scene. And again, she's all lonely at this point. She's just isolated in sort of this room, and the loneliness is really laying in, and the delivery dude is like, oh, it's another person. And she gets a package, and then she's like, wait here, because she wants to send a letter, maybe to the father, because this is before she's opened her own package, and sort of the tension of her going back into her house and like walking the long walk back to try and find money so she can send a letter and pay the dude who's just like this little like teenage dude. And the sort of the tension of like as time increasingly passes and she can't find her wallet or find any money, and then she just sort of finds cash going around and she starts running back, and there's like this shot of the money as she's carrying it, and it's like a poignant little shot of the money. And the dude's gone before she can like pay. It's just like this ultimate lonely feeling. I don't know, there's something so lonely about that entire sequence and the tension there. Because the whole time I'm like, the dude's gonna be gone. I don't know. That's such a weird... I feel like that when I'm like, oh, people are waiting for me. They're going to leave. Like, if I don't hurry up in 3 seconds, I don't know. It felt like the movie was playing on a shared sort of experience in that sense of that sort of anxious feeling. I just thought it was great, and then it was gone, and sort of her... Like, it's not like a traumatized look after he's gone. It's just like sort of a sad, oh. I don't know. There's just something about that that's so great. The next note, we don't see some of the breakups, the triplet, Arthur Miller. We do see the baseball player. We've talked about this. Oh, this is kind of a thing. One Direction mania. I went into this anecdote while I was recording the last one. I think I'll try and do it quickly. I was in like grade 5 when One Direction became a big thing, and I remember all the girls in my class were like obsessed with them, and I thought it was like crazy. These fucking girls being obsessed with pretty boys. And it wasn't even a jealousy thing at that point, I don't think. Because I don't think at that point I was, like, interested in girls yet. So it wasn't like, why do they love One Direction and not me? I'll never look like them, or something like that. I was completely, like, it was just like a how dumb and annoying sort of contrarian thing. Though, coincidentally, all the boys hated them. It had to be, at some point, subconsciously a jealous thing. It had to have been. But nonetheless, I wasn't cognizant of that. And sort of, through watching... There was a polyphonic video I think I watched the day I watched the movie. And it was about the Beatles. And it reminded me of all those shots of, I think, the famous Shea Stadium show. Shea Stadium might just be the one that Sally goes to in Mad Men. But I think that might be the famous one too. And that's why it was referenced in Mad Men. Where like the girls are just screaming, or you listen to them on like those late night shows in like the 50s, and it's just, you can't even hear the singing. You can just hear the preteen girls screaming their fucking heads off. And I always thought it was curious that like there really is no male equivalent to this. Like there aren't really like female girl bands where dudes sort of line up being in love with them. Obviously there's like a lot of sexualization of like, not even pop idols, but like, I don't know, Ariana Grande or something. And like, when you're in like the 9th grade, you're like, man, Ariana Grande's so hot, bro. And like, there's that sort of energy, but it's not like, oh, I'm in love with Ariana Grande, I want to marry her or something like that. It's just like, want to fuck her, bro, or whatever. Just dumb teenage boy shit. And I guess in this movie, there sort of is the equivalent of that sort of Beatle mania, One Direction mania type experience for men, where it is them reacting to Marilyn as she gets out, and there's one of the millions of crowd shots in this movie of the crowd just being crazy and like gross sort of towards her in their sort of admiration and love for her. That was something I was thinking about a lot. But yeah, it's sort of interesting that this is the equivalent, I guess. The unnerving opening sequence, the phone and the baby in the drawer thing, we haven't talked about that. That's like the biggest motif in the whole movie. It comes back all the time, baby in the drawer motif. Yeah, it's good. I'm getting the second battery warning. We gotta go through this shit fast. Her energy in those first scenes of sort of being at the whim of adults, and again, she's like smart, so as a little girl even, she's like cognizant. Like I remember when her like adoptive family that she has for like a few months is like, we're going to take you someplace fun or to the fair or something, you got to collect some of your things, and she sort of goes like, okay, and you can sort of tell that she understands that there's an uneasy feeling here, and she's probably going to get dropped off at the fucking orphanage, and then her getting pulled up at the orphanage, and the mother sort of being, and it's clear like the father just wants to get rid of the kid, and the mother is sad about it and is apologizing. That was all Really good stuff. But I really like the intelligence they give to the little girl, because she is like the first 20 minutes is all of her before we get to adult Norma Jean. The anxiety of her looking for her wallet, the different abortion scenes, the music is incredible, and my favorite shots, her walking through the house, the burning building, camera getting to her before Arthur, final shot of the cameraman. Yes, so we have done all the notes. Incredible stuff. We have to end quickly. Chat, who is not here because we're not streaming these. Oh, this is another thing I kind of wanted to talk about at the beginning of whether or not we should stream these. It could be a good idea, especially if I announce the movies beforehand, and it's and so we can all watch it and then talk about it. Though if I was getting interrupted by chat, this would probably be more of a mess. I don't know. Leave a comment down below if you would rather this be streamed or just done like this. Blonde is a 5-star fucking movie. I won't hear otherwise. It was great. Unironically, probably a top 5 movie of mine now. I've always had 4. Well, I guess now there's 2 Ava movies that I really like, so technically I have 5 now. I have them, the final 2 Ava things, Jackie Brown, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and The Godfather Part 2. Those were always my favorite movie. Blonde might be in that category now. I really like this shit. I love abstract shit. I loved the emotion. I loved the female plight stuff. I loved the loneliness aspect. I loved it descriptively. I thought it was great. I gave it 5-star on Letterboxd. You should go and watch it and give it 5 stars too, and not be a hating ass hater like these other hoes. You'll complain like some hoes. With that being said, Casablanca probably next week. We'll be back the same time. I don't know what day I'm going to upload this, but a week from that, we'll continue. But with that being said, as I race against the battery, support links in the description below. Thanks.